Captain George Jones pressed his back against the jagged coral reef. His binocular scanned the dense jungle canopy above the Peleliu beaches, waiting for a single muzzle flash. 23 dead Marines, 0 confirmed enemy casualties. At 06:15 on September 17, 1944, a sharp crack of an Arisaka Type 99 rifle echoed directly overhead. Another Marine dropped into the sand. The invisible enemy fired exclusively from the trees. Temperatures on the Palau Islands often reached 40 degrees Celsius, adding to the exhaustion of the pinned-down troops. Jones scanned the foliage again. He searched for any subtle movement among the palm fronds, but the spatial geometry of the defense offered no ground targets. 23 killed in 48 hours represented a tactical anomaly. That specific number equaled roughly 12% of a standard United States rifle company of 193 men. The enemy held elevated positions completely out of visual contact. American infantrymen were dying from high-angle fire delivered by concealed shooters. The Arisaka Type 99 fired a 7.7 millimeter cartridge. These heavier bullets struck the Marines from above, bypassing natural ground cover on the beach. The steep elevation angle and the dense canopy broke standard infantry engagement rules. The Japanese snipers operated from concealed platforms suspended 12 meters above the jungle floor. Jones lowered his field glasses. His company remained trapped on the open sand. Every attempt to suppress the hidden shooters failed. Riflemen pointed their weapons upward. They fired blindly into the thick vegetation. The traditional Marine response required direct visual contact and aggressive forward movement. Standard return fire proved useless against targets at an elevation of 12 meters. 270 meters gained in 48 hours. Since the landing at 8 in the morning on September 15th, the push inland stalled at that exact mark. The tactical focus shifted away from ground bunkers. Sergeant Major Hiroshi Tanaka turned the canopy into a network of elevated firing points. Shooters anchored themselves tightly to the palm trunks using thick hemp rope. They blended into the foliage. The entire forest formed a spatial geometry of defense. A single man tied to a tree operated a Type 97 sniper rifle. The elevated angle altered the physics of the battlefield. With a reach of 400 meters, one rifleman locked down an area exceeding 500,000 square meters of beach. The Japanese military discarded traditional trenches for this three-dimensional control zone. The firing range spanned 400 meters of the coastline.
Inside this three-dimensional network, every discharge remained invisible. Lance Corporal Martinez from the 2nd Squad took a single step between two palm trunks. An Arisaka Type 99 rifle fired from the canopy. The 7.7 millimeter projectile traveled at 730 meters per second. The distinct crack of the weapon echoed across the beachhead. A wet impact sounded as the bullet struck human flesh. Martinez collapsed into the sand without uttering a single sound. The shooter was already moving to a new branch. There was no muzzle flash visible against the thick foliage. Leaves did not shake. The Japanese army faced deep logistical deficits across the island. Naval blockades severed external supply lines, forcing strict conservation of infantry ammunition. A hidden marksman carried exactly 20 rounds for 20 specific targets.
Every pull of the trigger had to convert into one dead American Marine. The sniper shifted his position higher up the trunk. The men on the ground stopped looking forward. They stared upward. The lack of visual contact forced the squad to halt their advance. They possessed heavy firepower, but their guns required a visible coordinate to strike. Death came from above.
Firepower capable of turning reinforced concrete bunkers into dust proved entirely useless against a canopy of simple palm leaves. Traditional United States Marine Corps tactics demanded aggressive assaults and overwhelming force at the point of contact. Doctrine failed. Infantrymen carried standard M1 Garand rifles alongside heavy tactical support weapons. The Browning automatic rifle could cycle over 500 rounds per minute, while offshore naval artillery provided massive suppressive capabilities. Instead of utilizing precise coordinates, frustrated Marines blindly unloaded entire machine gun belts directly into the dense foliage above. The pungent smell of burnt cordite hung over the jungle floor following these useless barrages.
Every bullet fired without a clear visual target simply vanished into the thick canopy. Discharging thousands of rounds into empty tree crowns merely depleted essential combat supplies without neutralizing the actual threat. Ammunition disappeared. Despite possessing immense ground superiority, conventional heavy weapons could not hit a concealed shooter at 12 meters altitude. The 12-meter altitude created a deep ballistic trap. Why did American return fire fail to reach the target? Gravity and the dense jungle canopy worked against shooters on the ground. Japanese snipers had analyzed infantry movements during the Guadalcanal and Tarawa campaigns. They understood the physical advantages of elevation. Firing downward eliminated complex range estimation. The shooter let gravity pull the 6.5-millimeter projectile toward the earth. The Type 97 bullets easily pierced through several feet of vegetation. The Japanese bullet maintained lethality through the foliage. The American bullet lost its energy when fired vertically upward. A Marine pointed his 4-kilogram M1 Garand straight toward the canopy. He pulled the trigger. The .30 caliber projectile slammed into the first layer of vegetation. The crunch of thick palm branches echoed under the incoming fire. Shooting at such a steep vertical angle subjected the bullet to intense gravitational drag. This physical resistance sharply reduced the accuracy and stopping power of the M1 Garand. The weapon failed to match its performance in standard horizontal combat. The heavy bullet tumbled right after hitting the first obstacle. It rapidly shed its velocity. Palm branches deflected American bullets from their trajectory. While the infantry struggled to pierce the canopy with standard rifles, Lieutenant Joseph Walker evaluated the situation from the waterline. He stood on the beach. He studied the geometry of the forest without risking enemy fire. The steep angles rendered infantry rifles completely useless against the hidden platforms. The Marines needed a weapon capable of reaching elevated positions and delivering massive explosive force to shatter the timber itself. The exact solution anchored offshore. Dozens of landing craft idled in the shallow water. Their steel decks carried twin-mounted 40-millimeter Bofors cannons. The military originally installed these heavy weapons specifically to repel incoming Japanese Mitsubishi A6M0 fighters. Naval planners expected fierce aerial resistance and heavy bombing runs during the initial amphibious assault. But the sky over Peleliu remained entirely clear. The fighters never arrived. The fleet faced zero threats from the air. The anti-aircraft guns remained silent. 120 high-explosive shells per minute against lone snipers. Lieutenant Walker observed the idle offshore assets and formulated a radical proposal. The troops would deploy rapid-fire anti-aircraft artillery against terrestrial positions. The heavy metal clank of 40-millimeter shells feeding into the autocannon receiver offered a brute force spatial solution. The original Swedish gun design utilized top-loaded 4-round clips to maintain this continuous rate of fire. The tactical geometry of the battlefield shifted. A 10-meter blast radius eliminated the need for precise aiming. Infantrymen no longer needed to locate the exact branch hiding an enemy shooter. Every suspicious canopy received a concentrated burst of high-explosive ordnance. This mechanical volume of fire neutralized the layered Japanese concealment methods. The new approach violated decades of established military tactics. Traditional precision marksmanship gave way to total area saturation. The Marines stopped fighting the individual soldiers hidden inside the vegetation. The environment itself became the primary hostile target. Massive destructive power replaced the futile search for individual coordinates. The Americans prepared to level the jungle entirely. Analysis of the available hardware proved that only one weapon could physically erase the camouflage environment itself. Designed by A.B. Bofors in Sweden during the 1930s to hunt fast-moving aircraft, this autocannon now became the primary tool for clearing the Peleliu jungle. Engineers originally built the gun to hit aerial targets at ranges up to 4,000 meters. Now the infantry fired it point-blank into the canopy. The barrel delivered 120 rounds per minute. Every single trigger pull produced a sharp, supersonic crack. The heavy projectile left the muzzle. The 40mm shell weighed nearly 900 grams. This physical mass exceeded the standard Japanese Arisaka rifle bullet by almost 90 times. The kinetic energy transfer upon impact tore natural structures apart. The shell slammed directly into a solid palm trunk. It detonated instantly on contact. A dense cloud of metal fragments sheared straight through the thick wood. The blast shredded the tree. It collapsed the elevated sniper position hidden inside the foliage. These high-explosive rounds carried a 10-meter blast radius. The wide damage zone compensated for the lack of precise visual targets. Shrapnel spray, meant for tearing aluminum aircraft skin, worked as a mass logging tool. The vegetation vanished. Shrapnel speed exceeded 850 meters per second. 3 Bofors anti-aircraft guns sat on LCM decks offshore. The weapons were physically absent from the sand. They fired from landing craft floating in the sea. An L/60 Bofors weighed approximately 2 tons. This immense mass demanded a stable steel deck to absorb heavy recoil during continuous firing. 4 men operated the weapon, their roles divided strictly. The gunner visually searched the green island canopy instead of open clouds. The loader prepared and gripped heavy 4-round ammunition clips. The trainer cranked the manual hand wheels to adjust horizontal traverse. The commander directed the target acquisition process. Heavy metal elevation gears clanked loudly over the diesel engines as the crew swung the thick barrel upward. Instead of tracking fast planes across vast distances, the anti-aircraft operators adapted their standard procedures for stationary jungle clearance. Firing at the shoreline significantly reduced the engagement distance. This proximity increased the hit probability. Dense island foliage concealed individual snipers completely. Gun crews no longer needed pinpoint visual identification. The explosive fragmentation shells simply compensated for blind spots inside the thick canopy. The mechanics of the naval mount easily handled the irregular terrain. The platform allowed a full 360 degrees of rotation. Gunners could engage any coordinate along the coastline without moving the actual boat. The original anti-aircraft design perfectly matched the tall palm trees. To reach snipers hidden in the highest branches, operators just tilted the barrel. The maximum elevation reached 85 degrees. Elevating those barrels to 85 degrees required strict ammunition management. Sergeant John Miller stood on the deck. He divided the available stock into calculated bursts. The veteran gunner knew these weapons. He had directed their fire against incoming aircraft during the amphibious assaults on Tarawa and Saipan. Now he faced a completely different tactical problem. Miller inspected the heavy metal magazines. A single barrel held exactly 400 mixed rounds. He ran his hands over the metal feed clips. High explosive shells sat right next to bright tracer rounds in one continuous sequence. The heavy armor-piercing projectiles designed to shatter aircraft engines were useless against palm fronds. They would simply punch through the wood without exploding. Miller rejected them. He selected the high explosive variants. Each projectile weighed nearly 900 grams. Packed with TNT, they detonated on contact with any solid branch. Muzzle velocity approached 900 meters per second. The shells reached the high canopy almost instantly. Ammunition conservation dictated survival. Spraying the jungle blindly would empty the shipboard magazines in just 3 short minutes. Miller needed a strict formula to clear the canopy. He calculated the exact density of fire required to neutralize one concealed sniper position. 10 to 15 high-explosive shells proved sufficient to obliterate a single tree crown. The technical cyclic rate of the 40mm Bofors gun stood at 120 rounds per minute. The internal mechanics aligned with his math. 15 heavy projectiles left the barrel. The target absorbed exactly 8 seconds of fire.
Landing craft anchored 300 meters from the beach. The water provided a clear advantage for the communication equipment. Heavy backpack radios required direct line of sight to maintain a clear signal. Positioning boats on the open ocean eliminated physical obstructions between transmitter and receiver. The fire control system relied on visual and radio signals to prevent hitting friendly forces. Sergeant Miller needed to synchronize those 8-second bursts with the infantry at that distance. The forward observer in the dense jungle identified the suspected sniper position. He calculated the bearing relative to the coastal reference points.
The sequence to coordinate the high explosive impact required less than 30 seconds. Such rapid targeting eliminated the usual delay of naval bombardment. This response speed effectively locked the enemy shooter in place before he could retreat. The gunner aboard the vessel stood ready to traverse and elevate his 40mm weapon. The radio man transmitted the coordinates to the boat.
The 30-second radio relay redefined combat tactics. Infantrymen no longer needed to hit the enemy directly. Striking the immediate cover became sufficient. Standard M1 Garand rifles demanded a clear line of sight to secure a kill. This new approach abandoned individual marksmanship. Precision gave way to explosive volume. Marines stopped scanning the dense jungle canopy for a hidden barrel. Searching for a Japanese sniper's exact position wasted crucial time. Instead, offshore guns targeted the entire sector. A 40mm shell slammed into the branches. The blast shattered massive trunks, scattering jagged chunks of splintered wood across the ground. The explosion eliminated the shooter and his entire hiding place.
This firepower shift scaled beyond individual skirmishes. Sustained barrages proved effective against entrenched machine gun nests. They ripped through light fortifications and cleared vegetation for designated landing zones. Area suppression replaced point target elimination. The 40mm shell canceled the need for precise enemy detection.
Shifting to area strikes with 40mm shells required official command sanction. Captain Jones authorized this tactical change right on the beach. Japanese snipers continued to pin down the forward echelons. Infantry casualties mounted with each passing hour. United States Marine Corps doctrine traditionally relied on infantry maneuver. Calling in ship-based anti-aircraft fire against concealed land targets was outside standard procedure. Such a request demanded authorization at the captain level. Skills from skyward aiming transferred to horizontal firing. However, gun crews had to invent entirely new tactical procedures under live combat conditions. The situation demanded an immediate technological answer to a tactical deadlock. Heavy firepower would alter the physical battlefield. Time was running out. Captain Jones signed the order for the first test shot.
The authorization translated into immediate action when the first target presented itself later that afternoon. A single incoming shot from a breadfruit tree wounded Private Rodriguez, exactly 40 meters from the beach. The engagement commenced at 14:30 on September 18th. Corporal Masaru Yoshida utilized the dense canopy of the 18-meter tree for a perfectly concealed firing position. An adult breadfruit tree trunk routinely reaches 1 meter in diameter. This thick organic wall remained entirely impenetrable to the standard .30 caliber rifles carried by the Marine infantry. The target coordinates went straight to Sergeant Miller aboard Landing Craft Mechanized No. 7. The flat-bottomed vessel anchored exactly 320 meters offshore in the shallow water. Its crew operated a naval gun designed to hurl 900-gram projectiles at 880 meters per second.
Miller physically raised the heavy barrel to 45 degrees and traversed left until the foliage filled his optical sight. He selected high-explosive ammunition for maximum fragmentation and initiated a controlled burst. A loud rolling roar from the 40mm gun instantly drowned out the scattered crack of infantry rifles. The first shell struck the solid wood trunk exactly 5.5 meters above the ground. The kinetic impact sent a massive shower of jagged splinters flying through the surrounding vegetation. The second round ripped higher into the canopy, shredding leaves and severing heavy branches that rained down onto the sand. The third projectile detonated directly inside the upper crown, where the sniper had anchored himself into the wood. The localized blast wave eliminated the position and completely destroyed the natural concealment. 3 shells landed in one tree.
Captain Jones looked through his binoculars at the collapsing crown of the breadfruit tree. Those 3 shells had just turned the hidden position into a 15-meter zone of continuous destruction. The heavy branches settled slowly into the dust. A 15-meter destruction radius meant a continuous fragmentation coverage area of over 700 square meters. The calculation was straightforward. A standard 40mm projectile carried roughly 65 grams of high explosives. This generated hundreds of lethal steel shards upon detonation. The strike broke the local defensive architecture. Sergeant Major Tanaka had built a complex sniper network across the entire limestone ridge. His troops relied completely on elevation and thick canopy vegetation. The Japanese infantry manual emphasized hiding above the enemy line of sight to maximize field of vision. For 2 days, this tactic kept the Marines pinned down on the beaches. Conventional rifle calibers simply could not penetrate the dense tropical wood. Now the tactical equation shifted. Overlapping blast effects meant precise aiming was no longer required. The offshore weapons simply erased the entire environment holding the sniper. American infantrymen realized they finally possessed a direct countermeasure, allowing them to advance and request offshore fire support via radio. The Japanese defenders faced an unsolvable problem. Their elevated firing points were compromised. No natural cover could withstand an artillery strike.
The success of this initial artillery barrage launched a methodical clearing operation along the entire Peleliu coastline. By 1700 hours on September 18th, just 3 offshore guns had suppressed 47 suspected sniper points. The tactical procedure adapted as the naval gun crews refined their approach to ground support. A standard Bofors mount could cycle 120 rounds per minute. Instead of utilizing this automatic fire capability, Miller implemented a method of firing single zeroing shots to preserve the limited ammunition supply. He would discharge a single 2-pound high-explosive shell directly into the suspected canopy. The forward observers would watch for falling branches or any agitated movement within the dense foliage. If they detected signs of surviving infantry, the crew followed up with a quick series of additional projectiles.
The distinct scent of burnt cordite from 230 expended rounds settled across the narrow beachhead. Firing 230 shells at 47 individual targets meant an expenditure of fewer than 5 rounds per position. This ratio confirmed Miller's earlier calculations regarding the strict economy of using anti-aircraft artillery for precision ground clearance. The command measured the immediate results through the cessation of hostile harassment fire across the sector. American Marines advanced inland for the first time since the initial landing operation. The front lines shifted forward. They moved securely through coastal areas that had been designated kill zones just a few hours prior. The Japanese defensive network depended on continuous sniper pressure to pin down the advancing infantry companies. That tactical advantage vanished. With their meticulously prepared canopy positions splintered by the 40mm bombardments, the remaining spotters could no longer hold the high ground. The surviving Japanese snipers abandoned the shattered trees and retreated to secondary ground-level defensive lines deeper inland.
Commander Tanaka watched the retreat. The reinforced cave shook. Secondary ground-level trenches offered no salvation. Guns designed as a final shield against incoming aircraft became the primary weapon for ground suppression. Dust and stone chips fell from the limestone ceiling inside the command post. Outside, 40mm bombardments instantly shattered 6 camouflage sniper positions. 18 months of meticulous fortification planning vanished in seconds. Each twin-mounted Bofors barrel delivered 120 rounds per minute. A steady stream of 900-gram high-explosive projectiles impacted the trees at nearly 900 meters per second. The blast wave stripped bark and flesh alike. Evading shrapnel was impossible.
Marine commanders immediately exploited this mechanical overmatch to secure the contested beachhead. They ordered additional landing craft to shift coordinates along the coastal reef. The shallow draft boats dropped heavy anchors at measured intervals to prevent tidal drifting. Their intersecting arcs of fire locked the entire shoreline into a continuous destruction zone. Lieutenant Walker synchronized grid coordinates with the 1st Marine Division artillerymen. Positioning the craft transitioned from a spontaneous fix into a calculated suppression protocol. The trial became pure mathematics. He measured the exact distances between the anchored boats. He charted the intersection points of the 40mm shell trajectories. Every variable went into logs. American units countered the concealed Japanese sniper networks with applied geometry. Walker recorded the rate of fire required to neutralize an elevated position. He noted the spread of shrapnel against the coral ridges. This systematic data extraction happened in real time during active combat. His field documentation formed the basis of artillery tables for the subsequent Okinawa campaign. The process codified into doctrine.
They mapped the shoreline grid. Marines established fixed reference points for the naval guns. This mathematical approach eliminated the need for individual target spotting. Offshore suppressive fire became a highly repeatable tactical formula. By nightfall on September 18th, Miller's crews reported complete clearance of their assigned sectors.
Following Miller's night reports, the morning of September 19th gave Lieutenant Walker factual proof. 63 elite shooters occupied the beach the day before. Sergeant Major Tanaka emerged onto the surface at dawn. He inspected the ruined terrain of Peleliu. The sharp smell of burned wood and churned earth hung over the former defensive positions. Splintered tree stumps replaced camouflaged firing posts. Out of 63 men, exactly 17 reached the secondary rally point. This casualty rate highlighted a severe tactical disproportion. The Imperial Japanese Army invested a minimum of 1 year into training a single sniper. Offshore artillery wiped out these assets in seconds. A naval Bofors mount fired 200 rounds per minute, instantly breaking 12 months of combat preparation. Tanaka counted the bleeding survivors at the gathering zone. Most carried severe shrapnel wounds or injuries from falling debris. These men were not raw conscripts.
They had survived the intense jungle warfare of Guadalcanal and held the defensive lines on Tarawa. Their marksmanship remained unmatched, but infantry experience proved useless against coordinated heavy-caliber suppression. The new American procedure converted elite troops into simple statistical losses. The gathering zone held exactly 17 wounded Tarawa veterans.
Out of those 17 survivors, Private Kenji Nakamura gave his sergeant a precise report on the incoming fire. He described heavy shells deliberately tracking specific trees. The 40mm Bofors guns maintained a rate of 120 rounds per minute. Projectiles detonated inside the canopy. Wood splinters blasted outward with the velocity of steel shrapnel. Soldiers found zero protection in individual concealment against such dense saturation. The sniper teams assumed their camouflage shielded them from offshore bombardment. They guessed incorrectly. 3 years of Nakamura's Pacific combat experience became useless in a single afternoon. The Americans demonstrated the technical capability to eliminate solitary infantry targets using heavy artillery. Nakamura's frontline report on naval precision forced an immediate change in defensive architecture. Commanders gathered under stone vaults 2 hours before dawn. 0400 hours. The briefing took place inside a natural karst cave within Peleliu's central ridge. Voices echoed sharply against the damp limestone walls. Here, thick rock provided physical protection from the flat trajectories of offshore batteries. But this underground shelter came at a steep tactical price. The original doctrine relied entirely on elevation. Snipers occupied high positions to maximize their sectors of fire. A standard Japanese Type 99 rifle had an effective range of over 400 meters. From the upper canopy, a single marksman could dominate a wide approach route. Marine infantry with light weapons could not reach them. The 40mm Bofors guns erased this equation. High explosive shells systematically stripped away the foliage. Elevation no longer meant tactical superiority. It meant immediate exposure. The spatial geometry of the battlefield had to shift. Moving down into the ridges offered physical survival. Caves and reinforced coral formations could stop incoming shrapnel. But ground-level deployment created a severe mathematical compromise. Dense tropical vegetation restricted horizontal sightlines. Down in the jungle undergrowth, visibility dropped to 30 meters. The wide fields of fire vanished. A sniper could no longer control a broad sector of the front. The threat from the sea effectively pinned the Japanese defenders to the earth. Lieutenant Hiroshi Watanabe commanded the reserve sniper detachment. He analyzed the shrinking engagement zones on the tactical map. He pointed out the new defensive lines across the lower ridges. Watanabe proposed bringing all remaining shooters down to the rock level. Moving the shooters to the ground level meant abandoning their primary tactical advantage. Since 1942, Japanese infantry relied on mobility and elevated vantage points to control the battlefield. Now, they forced their most capable marksmen to anchor themselves within stationary defensive bunkers. The high ground was no longer a sanctuary. It had become a predetermined target for naval gunnery. Sustained offshore fire stripped the defenders of their ability to engage targets across broad frontages. Men with years of specialized training found themselves reassigned to the roles of standard line infantry. The survivors integrated into conventional defensive positions, supporting broader tactical objectives instead of hunting high-value targets. This local dilemma mirrored a strategic deadlock that had crippled Japanese campaigns since 1942. Individual skill could not offset a profound material imbalance. The American industrial base possessed the capacity to deliver thousands of high-explosive shells to a single island. They shipped this ordnance faster than the Japanese command could transport one reinforcement company across the Philippine Sea. The defenders found themselves trapped in an unwinnable cycle of tactical adaptation. Whenever they developed a new defensive method, the opposition deployed advanced weaponry that erased the advantage within weeks. Precision marksmanship could no longer disrupt the advancing formations when artillery leveled the terrain itself. It was the permanent end of the autonomous elite shooter doctrine in the Pacific Theater. The permanent loss of elite sniper autonomy materialized on a single sheet of paper. At 0600, Colonel Kuno Nakagawa reviewed the morning casualty report inside his headquarters bunker. The typed document on his desk detailed a specific breach in the Japanese defensive line. Corporal Yoshida was dead. 3 surviving marksmen confirmed the event. They had observed the strike from adjacent trees. The sequence of destruction was clinical. American anti-aircraft crews directed 40mm Bofors fire straight into the jungle canopy. The guns fired at a cyclic rate of 120 rounds per minute. Each high-explosive shell weighed roughly 900 grams. The rapid detonations did not just kill Yoshida. The resulting blast radius analysis proved that survival was physically impossible for anyone caught within the fragmentation zone. The anti-aircraft rounds obliterated every trace of the concealed position. The ground below the shattered tree line was now just torn wood, pulverized coral limestone, and cratered earth. Yoshida had commanded a critical field of fire. His rifle covered exactly 300 meters of the landing zone. This measurement matched the exact distance a standard United States Marine rifle company closed during a frontal assault. The 40mm weapons ripped a company-sized avenue of approach straight through the Peleliu perimeter. Nakagawa analyzed the exact dimensions of this gap. The defensive network was failing. The remaining sharpshooters could no longer rely on elevated camouflage to stall the advance. They were forced to descend from the canopy and integrate into standard infantry fortifications. The tactical advantage of altitude was gone. The island garrison now had to face American heavy artillery from static caves and pillboxes. The command staff silently processed the mathematics of the breach. 300 meters. That 300-meter gap of unprotected sand forced the remaining Japanese infantry to abandon their above-ground camouflage entirely. By midday on September 19th, the island's sniper threat ceased to exist. Individual marksmanship training became irrelevant. Commanders immediately mandated collective defense procedures to hold key choke points. Riflemen traded the open ventilation of palm tree canopies for the enclosed space of coral-reinforced concrete pillboxes. The high ground was relinquished. Troops retreated underground. Surviving marksmen descended from the ridges, receiving new assignments as basic support infantry within the subterranean defenses. The new tactical doctrine favored mass casualties over precision disruption. Direct anti-aircraft fire rendered decades of specialized camouflage training obsolete. The defenders permanently abandoned all elevated firing positions in favor of ground-level fortified shelters.
The ground-level tactical shift did not remain an isolated field anomaly. 48 hours. That was the time required for the Marine Corps headquarters in Pearl Harbor to receive the first radio messages. A coded transmission crossed the 7,000 kilometers of open ocean between Peleliu and Hawaii in mere hours. The signal went straight to the decryption room. The dry clatter of the teletype machine printed the initial damage assessments. Operators tore the continuous paper strips. They pasted them into a formal briefing folder. The message outlined the complete suppression of enemy marksmen using 40mm weapons in a direct ground support role. The military communication network processed the victory fast. This printed folder landed directly on the desk of Major General Roy Geiger. As the commander of the 3rd Amphibious Corps, Geiger read the raw field data. He grasped the operational scale of the battlefield success.
The general demanded detailed after-action documentation from every combat unit involved in the anti-aircraft deployment. The field innovation bypassed standard bureaucratic delays. Headquarters needed to formalize the frontline improvisation into a repeatable tactical maneuver. Lieutenant Walker compiled the comprehensive written analysis. His document contained specific technical parameters, firing angles, and the psychological impact of the high-explosive barrages on entrenched infantry. The report detailed how the rapid destruction of elevated positions changed the island's balance of power. The paperwork left the Pacific Theater. It headed east across the mainland on military cargo planes. By October 1, 1944, the physical dossier arrived in Washington. The raw combat data moved from the frontline trenches to the top command echelon in under 2 weeks. Military couriers delivered the sealed files straight to the training facilities in Virginia. Artillery specialists at the Marine Corps schools in Quantico opened the folders and began analyzing the new tactical manual.
While Quantico specialists studied paper reports, Pacific Fleet supply officers rewrote manifests. Anti-aircraft crews shifted their combat profile. Instead of the precise tracking of aerial targets, gunners learned to strike stationary bushes. The adaptation demanded new approaches to fire control across the Pacific Theater. Sergeant Miller submitted technical recommendations for this ground transition. A standard 40mm armor-piercing projectile weighed 0.9 kilograms with different ballistics than fragmentation rounds. This physical discrepancy forced the comprehensive retraining of targeting personnel. The physics of combat required an overhaul of ammunition chains. Armor-piercing shells were designed specifically to penetrate aircraft fuselages. High-explosive ammunition was required to destroy infantry hidden within dense vegetation. Gunners extracted the heavy, solid rounds from their storage racks.
Loaders shoved the new fragmentation clips downward into the Bofors feed mechanisms. A heavy metallic clank echoed as the high explosive shells locked into place. This sudden tactical shift created deep logistical ripples through the naval infrastructure. Ground operations consumed fragmentation rounds at a rate that existing ship inventories could not sustain. Supply officers throughout the Pacific Fleet altered their procurement and distribution procedures. Captain Jones received the rank of Major and an office at headquarters in Washington. New ammunition specifications demanded a single combat standard. The officer transferred to the East Coast to draft the new manuals. He collaborated with tactical specialists to formalize 40mm naval gunfire support. His Peleliu improvisation became the official doctrine for the remaining Pacific theater. Operations on Iwo Jima and Okinawa involved over 100,000 American soldiers combined. The localized field tactic scaled to cover these large troop formations. Word of the initial tactical success spread rapidly among infantry divisions. Marines previously accepted heavy sniper casualties as a mandatory cost of amphibious warfare. Now they held a proven countermeasure against elevated positions. This psychological shift altered the baseline preparation for upcoming campaigns. Morale improved significantly across all deployed combat echelons. Marine units repeatedly practiced the new suppression procedures before boarding their transport ships. While American training camps finalized new manuals, shovels and pickaxes were already biting into the dense coral limestone of Peleliu. Captured intelligence reports confirmed a total shift in Japanese engineering strategy across the Pacific theater. High canopies offered zero survival chance against rapid 40mm explosive shells, rendering the traditional elevated high ground obsolete. New defense plans mandated extensive subterranean networks spanning the entire island. Soldiers breathed damp, stale air inside freshly dug cave systems, preparing firing arcs protected from heavy naval bombardment. The defenders went underground. 40mm blueprints filled the assembly halls. Japanese subterranean bunkers demanded rapid hardware modifications for the Bofors guns. Aberdeen Proving Ground in Maryland took the challenge. The site covered over 72,000 acres. It was the central ballistic testing hub for the United States Army. Every modified weapon faced strict evaluation before deployment. Engineers bent over their large wooden drafting tables. The sharp scent of machine oil mixed with fresh cyanotype prints. Draftsmen worked directly with Pacific combat veterans on the designs. They developed enhanced optical sights for direct fire. They redesigned the heavy gun mounts for better depression angles. The artillery had to hit ground targets without losing its anti-aircraft capability. The military command recognized this field improvisation. Lieutenant Walker received a promotion to captain. The Marine Corps assigned him to the Artillery Development Board. Tactical innovation required institutional backing and systematic support. Changes happened fast. Factory floors across the nation shifted their primary manufacturing focus. Production lines integrated the modified mounts by the first quarter of 1945. Those modified gun mounts tested at the Aberdeen Proving Ground outlasted the Second World War. On Peleliu, anti-aircraft weapons fired from the crushed coral dirt. In Korea and Vietnam, this same principle of area suppression would take to the air. The Marine Corps recognized the permanent tactical shift. Sergeant Miller walked off the Pacific battlefield and stepped directly into a new institutional role. Headquarters appointed him as a heavy weapons specialist. He became the chief instructor at the Marine Corps training schools. Classroom theory could not replace raw jungle combat experience. Miller taught successive generations of incoming artillery officers exactly how to level a 40mm barrel against terrestrial targets. He broke down the mechanics. The tactic evolved. It quickly outgrew the original towed steel carriages. By the Korean and Vietnam conflicts, this ground-level infantry improvisation formed the fundamental core of airborne tactics. UH-1 and AH-1 helicopter gunships adopted the exact same logic, born on the Pacific Islands. Instead of hunting individual enemy targets with precision rifles, American aviation units saturated entire jungle grids with high explosive rounds. The mechanical cyclic rate of rapid suppression fire shattered thick canopy branches in seconds. Splintered wood and shrapnel rained down on the jungle floor. Volume replaced precision. Aviation technology favored high-volume payloads over single-target engagement. This tactical pivot yielded immediate strategic dividends before the Pacific War even reached its conclusion. Post-war intelligence analyses confirmed a structural collapse of the enemy defensive lines. The sheer density of explosive ordnance stripped away all physical camouflage from the island strongholds. Japanese commanders across the entire theater issued new operational orders to their garrisons. They abandoned their treetop sniper networks. One single tactical improvisation on Peleliu became the standard for the armed forces. Area suppression doctrine permanently altered the American approach to infantry combat. The canopies above the former Japanese positions remained permanently silent. Captain Jones deployed heavy machinery to solve an immediate ground problem, establishing a new baseline for battlefield survival. The military prioritized technological superiority over infantry risk. Overwhelming firepower replaced costly frontal assaults. Commanders directed steel instead of flesh. Firing an anti-aircraft weapon horizontally at the jungle canopy formed the basis for modern combat operations. The primary objective shifted to securing decisive victories while sustaining minimal casualties. The artillery engineered to destroy aircraft remained aimed directly at the earth.